Somebody who has no clue about VR, Metaverse, needs total different approach as somebody who knows it. First question I'm still hearing, and probably you also, is like, oh, the device is so expensive. The device is not the expensive bit. You need to start rethinking the way you work. Everything is two-dimensional. We use Word, PowerPoint, and all the stuff. We completely forget to visualize things. We completely forgot to tell stories. I always say, like, death on PowerPoint will be always death on PowerPoint.
Back to MetaRick, where we talk about emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, immersive technology around XR, AR, VR, the blockchain, and all sorts of other innovative projects out there in the world. Today we have Rolf calling in from Germany, and I am so excited to learn more about his story and the work that he is doing with the virtual reality platform Raum. Rolf, you just got back from South by Southwest. How are you feeling? You acclimating back to the time zone all right?
Unfortunately, I'm feeling well, but I realize I'm getting old. It was easier to reach US with the time zone, but coming back, I'm still struggling. Let me be political correctly, so it could be better.
Let's hop right into it, Rolf. So before getting into your whole backstory and kind of where you come from, what is it that you're doing in the space today? Give us the high-level spiel on Raum and kind of what your focus area is.
Okay, so I'm one of the founding members of the lovely company called Raum. It's a German word, so please, the world outside, get used to learn German words. My focus there is the marketing and sales aspect and driving the business and growing the business. So I call myself Chief Metaverse Officer because Chief Marketing Officer is a bit old-fashioned. And I like to have a bit of fun, so therefore I put the Metaverse in brackets because it's still not existing, but hopefully in a couple of years, Metaverse is a common thing where everybody wants to spend the time in.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. And that's part of the reason for even putting the show together is like the Metaverse is really more of a philosophical concept, this place that we might get to eventually with interoperable virtual spaces. But for today, we're all kind of building towards that together. And so no one's really a full-on expert. I love the concept of putting that term in brackets, but we're all excited about it. We're all actively participating in that journey together, trying to get to that eventual philosophical concept of a metaverse. So what exactly is Raum? It's a virtual reality platform?
So Raum is, as you mentioned correctly, from technology point of view, virtual reality platform. And as usually, everybody's put the word metaverse in. So you can say virtual reality or metaverse platform for B2B business. So we're very B2B focused, simply to bring remote teams together, work a bit more creative, more modern. I will not say, I'm a big believer it will be the working of the future, simply as working in the metaverse or virtual reality environment enables a lot of creativity and reduce a lot of obstacles you have in your life. Like everybody loves flip charts, whiteboards, and sticky notes on the wall, but if the wall is full or the 2 hours where you have booked the meeting room is over, you have to take everything off, and when you then restart, most of the information is gone. And in our environment, you simply have the workspace open. It's in a saving mode. You go back in a week and you can exactly start where you left off. So this is one of the beauties of Raum. But as mentioned, B2B focused for all type of use cases for all corporates from small to large.
I love it. And we'll dig much more into that later into the conversation. As you know, I also work in that space with Engage XR, and there's a lot of overlap with what our platforms are focused on accomplishing. But before we get into the nitty gritty of how businesses use the metaverse and kind of what your experience has been with Raum, I want to zoom out a little bit. I want to learn about Rolf. Tell me your story. Like what were you doing before Raum, and how did you find your way to stumbling into this space of the metaverse?
Into the lovely space of the metaverse. Very simple. My background is corporate, so I worked 20 years at a lovely company called Sony, where I spent 14 years in broadcast business and 6 years in the medical field. I always describe when I left broadcast, people ask me, why are you leaving broadcast? And I said, hey, I'm getting tired of all the beautiful models when you be on an exhibition. I learned the real beauties inside, so I stepped into medical, into the operating theater, managing and networking all the cameras together so that you get all the insights from the people, from the patient. Very focused on educational purpose. So if you know how difficult it is for a surgeon to become a surgeon, you really understand how important it is to get good footage, good material out of the operating theater for this type of training. And this was also one area where I got 2017 my first touch point on virtual reality, because during this time I created a proof of concept for a first surgical VR training tool, which everybody loved. It was a bit ahead of the time, and on this point of time we did it on a lovely combination of PlayStation 3 and PlayStation VR, just to demonstrate what is possible in today's technology. But as I said, too early. A couple of years later, a lot of VR training applications from companies were popped on the market. But this was my first touch point where I started to get really used and like the benefits of VR. And in 2020, when I decided to change my career path and left the corporate environment, I bumped into the guys I worked with during the 2017 proof of concept. And they had a prototype of Raum, and as a project kicked off simply due to the fact of we were internally looking about what tool we can use to drive our own business. And this is how Raum was started, and we showed it a lot of customer company connections we had. And at the end of 2020, everybody was so excited and said, come on, guys, you need to set up your new company. You need to bring this to market. And this was a point of time where we sat together and said, let's take Raum out of the agency where it has been started, set up a new organization, build a new company, and simply bring it into market. And this is what we're doing since the year 2021. So quite a young startup. Also, I'm saying I'm a bit gray, and we are not a typical startup, but our company is quite young and agile.
One of the things that I find the silver lining in the chaos of the world, right, is like we're currently feeling a lot with SVB going down and with everything going on in the tension of the Ukraine right now. And it feels like there's always some sort of global crisis for us to focus on. And 2020 with the pandemic and like all of the world going through that together, I feel like it also did create this empathy where everyone's going through a similar pain at the same time. And it created opportunity, like you just described, where a lot of folks had to challenge their lives and like really think about, am I doing what I should be doing right now? Is there a new business opportunity? Is there a new lifestyle I want to lean into? And a lot of ideas were born out of that crisis. So I think that's kind of the silver lining I always look back on, of like all of this innovation that comes from that chaos.
Absolutely. And if you think about how many companies in the year 2020 have started to use video conference system and things like Zoom, Teams, you name it, where for some people it was absolutely normal already the 5 years before the pandemic, but they just started in 2020. And it was quite interesting to find out during this time that when I went to some companies and introduced Raum and the next evolutionary step, working in virtual in an immersive environment, like you be physically together, one guy said, hey, Rolf, I fully get it. I'm just teaching my staff how a video conference system is working. So I'm quite happy that they understand, activate the microphone, activate the camera. But absolutely, as you said, it's always a big driver in the next evolution step. And what we also see is after things becoming a bit normal, the people went back to a kind of like process of physically meetings again. But then they quite quickly came back and said, okay, we got so used to it and saw the benefit of doing things in the immersive environment like we are in the same room, which we don't want to miss. And then I think the real progress of adapting the technology has been started. Kickoff was the pandemic, but now it's like mindset is changing and the people start really getting used to it.
I think there's there's obviously a lot of change that's happened in the VR space since its creation. Since even looking back as far as like the Nintendo VR Boy or whatever, that the headset that you kind of have a stand and look into is one of these early games. I just stumbled across that little piece of history recently. But there's a lot of change that's happened with the technology, a lot of cultural change through things like the pandemic and these global shifts in culture and how we behave, how we work together. And so when you were talking about your background, when you were creating these simulations for healthcare, you mentioned that it was too early. Like a lot of this stuff was too early. And I'm wondering, was it too early because of the quality of the hardware, the quality of the software? Was it more of a cultural thing? Like what made the tech too early at the time when you were working on it then?
I think one part was still that the hardware seemed quite expensive because the reason why we use this at this point of time on the combination PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4, sorry, and VR headset, the price combination was around about like 800-900 euro, which was really cheap compared to desktop-based VR systems, which were already in the market, which were already used for high-end simulations, and the gamer who are love to invest 5,000 euro in a high-spec PC. So it was a bit of like the technology. Quality-wise, I would say not a big topic. It was more like the price investment to get the hardware in. And the second thing was simply the content, because people just realized how much effort is needed to make a good virtual training tool. And maybe medical is not an easy path. I think there are other areas where, if I would say plumbing is maybe easier to achieve because you can build the application easier to put all the tubes into another and make sure the water is flowing, as a simple example. In the medical, you have so many different areas and it's so many techniques you need to teach. And if you see the available tools right now is a lot of like, get a hip replacement, get a knee replacement, where you more learn the steps instead of the real technique. So I think also as of today, we're still at beginning, and I'm seeing here the virtual reality training set as a additional preparation for the surgeons. But coming back to your question, I think it was only ahead of time in regards of, yes, hardware was not available everywhere. The surgeon loved our combination because they said, hey, cool, I can tell my wife I need a PlayStation for educational purpose. But yeah, the content was a bigger thing. And to develop the content, you need the combination of surgeons who are capable of telling you what is the important piece to learn, to teach, and somebody who is capable of transferring this information into a three-dimensional, I would not say gamification piece, so that it really, at the end of the day, is a combination that you can say it helps, and it's not just a showcase.
Yeah, I think so it's a really good point that you're making about these added layers to building a program like that isn't just the hardware, right? Like I think when people think VR is expensive and they talk about this barrier to entry being the price point, the hardware is not that expensive. Like if you think about like a MetaQuest 2 is like $400 right now, $450. That's not that expensive compared to other devices and hardware that companies are already paying for. Where it gets expensive, that I've found, at least in my few years in the industry, is all of the infrastructure around the program. Like you need people to define what's going to happen in that world, like either a marketer or an HR training development person. You need a team of 3D designers and probably some coders to go in and write all the scripts for the animations, and then a platform to host all of that if you're not hosting it yourself on whatever cloud servers you're choosing to host with. And so I guess what is shifting in the industry to try and make those things easier? Like, how do you see us making a Metaverse program more scalable moving forward?
You mentioned it, and I really need to laugh. It's still, as of today, the first information or the first feedback is, oh, the devices are too expensive. And I always ask the people, please take out your mobile phone. And to be honest, 10 years ago, a 450 euro mobile phone was top. That was the high-end, the most expensive phone you can buy. So that's the price of a headset, as you mentioned it. And now, like, above 1,000 euro is now the top-end smartphone. So it's really bizarre how people perceive virtual reality as expensive. I think they completely forgot the pricing, or they simply link VR, the pricing of the Meta Quest, as you mentioned, more into a gaming tool, not as an really working kit.
Sorry to interrupt, but I think my thought on this is that they don't compare it to a gaming console, because if they did, it's still cheap, right? Like a PS5 was going for $1,000 when it was had supply constraints during the pandemic. But I think they compare a VR headset to like a really high-end controller for a gaming console, which is just so wrong. It's people haven't experienced putting one on enough, right?
And exactly, specifically when you hear that you can use a cable and connect it to your PC, people sometimes don't understand that the Meta Quest 2 is a standalone unit. It's not just a display. But yeah, so what is what we find out is really the point, and you mentioned it, is the device is not the expensive bit. Companies are understanding and have realized developing everything by themselves is maybe not the best option. That's why then companies like Raum have a clear reason to exist, as our focus is providing the platform. And our intention is really to enable the customer to do everything by themselves, from uploading 3D objects and all the stuff, that they can really be self-sufficient, and we provide the platform. But what we still see, and what we educate the organizations, is you need to start rethinking the way you work. We got really lazy, I need to say. We got used to a 2D monitor. Everything is two-dimensional. We use Word, PowerPoint, and all the stuff. We completely forget to visualize things. We completely forgot to tell stories. So I really like when people go on a PowerPoint mode. And I always say, like, death on PowerPoint will be always death on PowerPoint, independent if it's in real life, on a large stage, or in virtual reality. But why not simply start telling a story? And storytelling is also something people need to rethink. You know, you have your PowerPoint deck, probably the last 5 years. You use the same one, you just update slides, tweak it a bit, use new samples, but the content is not changing. If you look from an HR perspective or all the different areas, a lot of the content is the same. But if you need now bring it into the immersive environment, you need to do a hell of a job to transfer the information. And this is where people get a bit of nervous. Do they really want this? And then they start to see, to discuss, is this really a value? And you can see two types of people. People who say, yes, there's an absolutely value, and they start doing it. And after a while, they find out, hey, it's like training. Yeah, the first 2-3 times, it's a bit hard work, but then it gets normal. And then they really start getting use of it. And the people who are nervous that they have to redo the work, they are a bit more protective. But they need only time. I think the human being is always the biggest factor which makes a success and a quick transition into a new technology or a slow one. And if I use the example of 2020 with video conference system and tools like Zoom and Teams, a lot of companies had no use before, and they got all used within 12 months because there was a need. And I think the same will happen with VR. And I also use the explanation. We had this already a couple of years ago when personal computer were installed in the offices, and the people need to work with a computer, and they had no clue what a computer is. And after a while, they said, "Hey, it's better than my typewriter. If I make an error, I can just correct it, and I can do the printout at the end, and I save a lot of time and efforts, and I can modify it, and I can save information and recreate it and share it." And then computers, the price dropped down and it was achievable, and the people bought it for home because they learned what is the value. And I think in VR it's the same. VR you already have today for gamers, but now through the business, the mass market will start learning the benefit and they will bring it home. And of course, then they will find out, oh, I can also get some cool games on it, or a cool Tai Chi training course, or I can meet my friends around the globe, which I normally, not have the chance to play around golf with them.
Yeah, I think so you mentioned a lot of really valuable points in there, but one I want to double click on is this idea of storytelling and like the death by PowerPoint. Like I was recently, I never got on the Mad Men kick when that first came out. I heard a lot about it. I like saw all the memes with Don Draper, but recently I watched a couple episodes to try and check the show out, and it was an interesting reminder into how people used to sell creative presentations back in the day, where like they literally drew out mock-ups on a big piece of paper and would show you in a conference room, this is my idea. What do you think of idea one, idea two? And then over time, we got more efficient, right? Like we started to have stock images and stock graphics, and then you could end up compiling all of your content into a big content manager, and like you could access all those files really easily. And so what the evolution we just saw happen from physical to digital to streamlined, scalable digital with photo and video content, I think we're going to see a very similar evolution with 3D content. So right now we're so oversaturated with photo, video, and these 2D presentations that engagement is so challenging to retain. But now, basically AI, everyone's so afraid of this ChatGPT integration with Microsoft just replacing everyone's jobs. I feel like this is a path for those people to go down, is like, you shouldn't be manually creating PowerPoints anymore. Let the AI do that for when it's valuable, and then spend your time and your manual resources on something more interesting like virtual worlds and like 3D building, right?
Yeah, the only thing I would like to add is, but please leave your brain switched on and read what the AI is providing, because sometimes it's absolutely interesting what the message is, and you go like, I had a big fight with ChatGPT where I'm saying, what you're telling is wrong. And then he started to apologize, what I really liked. So I think it's, as you mentioned, it's a great tool. And if you think the next step, these are tools who should help your daily business. And if you then think about when people are saying, oh, wearing VR glasses, I cannot look at my computer. And if I find something, I want to have a connection on the laptop. And it's also difficult, blah, 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 blah. No, it's absolutely wrong. In a couple of years, you have a very useful voice assistant. And you simply tell them what you need. You say, please give me the last sales figures from XYZ. Give me the sales figures from last quarter. Please provide me the last contract I have sent to XY, all the stuff. You can simply talk to it, and the AI bots will probably help you. And I think this is something we got so used to, these home assistants where you get probably one generation, people don't know how to operate a light switch, they go in and it's a bit like Star Trek and you speak only with your computer, which I must say, when you're grown up with this area, it's not a threat. You should always be aware that you need to understand what you ask for, and you need to be able to analyze the data, which you get as a submission back, to find out if it's correct or not. You still should leave your brain activated and not get completely dumb. That's my only point.
Super important point, right? like especially the newer the technology is, the more skeptical we need to remain about it, as exciting as it all is. This is something I bring up all the time, but like my grandparents are people I look up to more than anyone in the world. They're in their early 80s. And they still have an Apple Watch and a Tesla, and like they're still constantly seeking to understand and learn about new technology, even though they barely understand it. It's like challenging for them to fully dive into all of it. They're still trying. And I think that it really shows in their personalities when they talk about technology. They don't have this fear where they like are looking down on the future and looking down on change. It's this open-mindedness while remaining skeptical about it, that I think is a healthy mindset.
Absolutely, absolutely agree to this comment. Yeah.
So I have another question for you around the evolution of the tech, right? So you've seen it from when it was way too early to like when it slowly started getting adopted to now as we really start leaning into it. One of the things that I get asked about a lot is I'm sorry for the sirens in the background, by the way. Hopefully,
As long as nobody's entering your room and take you out,
no,
it's all
no,
okay.
it's down the busy streets of San Diego. But my question for you is like, how do you balance having the most updated hardware, because it's constantly changing, right? Like part of what's allowing us to do so much more is the fact that new products, new software is coming out every month, every 6 months. So if someone was to buy MetaQuest 2 now, and then the Quest 3 or the Quest 4 comes out and it's so far ahead of what they have today, like how do you balance getting someone to buy into this stuff now and lean into learning without over investing? And like, are they just going to have to rebuy the same stuff in 6 months?
I see a very easy similarity. Personal computer was always the price of 2,000. 2,000 euro, 2,000 US dollar. If you had to start with it, it was a 2,000 mark. As of today, it's a similar thing. If you want to buy something, and if you go with a laptop or whatever, it has a price. And of course, if you wait 6-9 months, the price will drop, but new technology will come. So there's every time the discussion, should I wait or should I start now? And I simply can only make the comment, if you are really interested to move ahead, start. Don't wait. And maybe people say, yeah, should I go with the Quest 2 now, where the rumors of the Quest 3 are already around the corner? Should I wait for Apple? Yeah, we are waiting for Apple since how many years now? So you never know. So the point is, you need to find your day and decide to start. Luckily, there is an area where you can, a market where you can get the B graded one, where people who are more motivated to buy the latest are selling their first generation device. Simply start with something. It will be always around the corner, the next generation coming, and then you think like, damn, I paid so much money. No, think about, great, there's a new one coming. I like it. I get the new one and I will resell my old one. Maybe there's somebody who is happy with it. So don't be afraid to wait, is my recommendation.
Yeah, I think somewhat similarly on this is like, it's counterintuitive as a salesperson, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm still responsible for generating revenue, and I want everyone to buy into this stuff, and I want them to throw all their money at it. Obviously, that's my own self-interest wants that. But I think there's a balance where like, I think everyone should be involved and everyone should start experimenting, but I am a huge advocate for walking before you run. I'm seeing a trend in companies starting to lean into building these technical innovation teams. And I read a great report from McKinsey & Company with Andreessen Horowitz, I think it was Mark Andreessen, talking about how the IT side of the business has always been undervalued and hasn't had enough say in big picture decision making for the company. And now every company is a tech company. Like, it doesn't matter if you sell cars or consumer goods or anything. Technology is so instrumental to the workflows and internal efficiencies, as well as how you sell and market and engage with your consumer, that you need to have these visionary technologists making decisions. And so one of the things that, as someone's like starting to experiment, if they're going to do that walking before they run and kind of try and dabble in the metaverse, from your experience as a marketer and a seller and working in this space, like, how do you typically recommend someone dip their toe in the water or start their journey into the metaverse for their brand?
So if I look from an organization point of view, what I would recommend, I always recommend with I would describe it as an experience day. You can rent devices, absolutely no problem, and there's tons of different options available. Get a couple of headsets around and invite everybody from the company to explore. And really, first thing is like, get your head in the headset. simply see what it is. Because really interesting, a lot of people think like, oh no, I don't like this, I get sick. These are mainly the people you don't get out of the glasses after a while, because they really enjoy it after they've tried it, because they always mixed the current headsets with the 360 degrees video glasses, where you really need to sit still and where you get quite quickly seasick. So they're mixing it up, so they get really used to it. And when you have then an experience day, you can then simply should identify in your organization a handful, 5-10 people who are really becoming a kind of like the evangelist inside the organization, which should have the lead, which get a bit of more of training to know how you can take care of the hardware, cleaning and all the stuff, maintaining software updates, all the stuff, as you mentioned, everything with software needs to be a bit maintained, but also which can then drive kind of like a proof of concept. We also recommend, when you do the selection of the people, make sure the people that these are people who stay at least 12 months with the organization, because if you invest, you will invest in knowledge in these people. So let them start a proof of concept in an organization, should it be HR or marketing or sales or exhibition planning. You can mention, you can start in every area, start in one, define a proof of concept, and then get into a daily business mode. Try it out and really get your lessons and your learnings from it. And then simply move on and do maybe not only one proof of concept, do it 2 or 3 in different area. You get your experience, and then you can create a rollout plan, how to roll it out into your daily business. And this is what we in general recommend the companies to do. Of course, there's a lot of support we also offer as an experience sharing, knowledge sharing, hand holding. But we really find out the biggest challenge is to bring it in a daily operation. Because the people have normally already 2 jobs. Then they got a third one, which is explore the VR piece. And where we clearly said, no, find a small group who can drive it. And they bring it into the daily business. And this is what I can always share and recommend. Because if you have a small group of people who help then the rest of the employer to get used to the technology and help them, helping them to get on the daily operation is a great support. And then after a while, you get used to it. And people are quite happy to be in.
One of the things I really like about your recommendation there is you don't even start with, I think it's easy to start with like, okay, based on the brand, what's something really big for this brand that we can do, right? Like if you're a car company, how do we sell cars in the metaverse? Like if you're a cruise line, how do we get people to buy cruise line tickets in the metaverse, right? Like if you're a music company, let's do a concert. But what I love about what your approach is you're like, let's not think about a use case just yet. Let's not even consider what that big metaverse program looks like. Let's find some of this pre-built content, one of these platforms that exists that you can just jump inside of. Give people the chance to just move around, get a sense for that 3-dimensional space, get them familiar with VR in the first place before you start deciding what use cases to start trying. Because and this is another thing I've learned, and I'm curious if your experience has been the same, is VR seems like it's a very top-down buying process. Like it's not something that you're going to have like a lot of bottom-down users adopting it and then moving it up the chain. It's a lot of these very senior VP, C-suite executives kind of moving forward on a initiative. Has that been your experience, or do you find that there's a lot of that bottom-down, mid-level kind of piece of it too?
I would say it's a mixed. The problem I see when it's a top-down, then it's more like we have to put Metaverse on our agenda. And this is a hard piece because you need to identify a need. You need to identify an area to start with. And normally these type of decisions are, you do this task on top of your rest of your other daily work. If it's more like this is why we say start with an experience day. Get the people together. Maybe there's one person who's getting out of the experience day and say, this will help us with this problem. And if then the still top to bottom decision is there in a financial aspect, which I like, it's easier to do, but then they have a clear reason to explore.
Well, because that's a tough thing with emerging tech, right? Is when you're a mid-level employee, you might be excited about it, but you don't think you can get it approved, or you don't know that it's an option for you. And I feel like having that executive sponsorship, kind of pushing it, even to your point, like I know it can make it bigger than it needs to be out the gate, and people end up just doing these PR one-day drops that don't actually do anything. But that mid-level person needs that encouragement. They need someone to say, it's okay for you to go invest in this and try it out and spend your time on it. Because to your point earlier, it is kind of like a second job. Like, you need someone who's just so excited about this new piece of technology that they're willing to go out of their way to incorporate it in to the natural way of doing business. It's not something where there's usually like a fully dedicated VR team just yet. Like, there's some for consulting firms, but for most brands, they don't quite have that team built out yet.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. It's always important to get a sponsor. And this is why I say it depends on organization. Some organization, they have the top-bottom approach. Yeah. Some, they go from the working environment, a working level where they think they have good ideas. And this is where then a small pilot is helping. This is all under a specific threshold where also teams can make the financial decision by themselves because they don't invest in hardware. They rent the whole package and get some good use cases, some experience. And what they normally do, 99%, at the end of their pilot phase, they bring management in. They force management into the VR environment that they can see and experience by themselves. And this is how you get then a sponsor quickly on board.
It's interesting as we talk about this, and I'm glad we're talking about it, because I think the business side of Metaverse is really under talked about right now. You have a lot of people just leaning into like, what is an NFT and what's the blockchain, debating over the
Yeah, and should I get some space on these central
land? Debating about the philosophies about the future of the metaverse, and like that's a big piece of what we do on this show too. And I think it's really interesting. But this business side of like, how do you sell the idea of the metaverse? How do you get it approved? How do you build a team around it? Like, what are these practical day-to-day business things we've already been doing? How do we tie that strategy into this new technology? And as we talk about this idea of like, how does someone make that decision? How do you find that evangelist? I almost want to create like a playbook that's like how to enable an evangelist. Like, how do you help that guy who's just geeking out about Web3 inside their big Fortune 500 company? How do you give them the tools they need to talk to a senior level executive and speak their language and help get that idea heard in their organization?
Absolutely right. So normally you need to provide some persona information to all these so that they, somebody who has no clue about VR, Metaverse needs total different approach as somebody who knows it, because, hey, maybe he's already in a Facebook VR group or wherever and has already his own device. He needs a total different approach. And these type of information is what exactly we give then our contacts into their hands, and they can distribute it inside. Because it's, as you mentioned, it's the first question I'm still hearing, and probably you also, is like, oh, the device is so expensive. Yeah, as we mentioned at the beginning. And this is where you really start. The business aspect has not been fully understood, because some people, I had one discussion that was hilarious, because they saw VR as a threat for their company cars. They were really thinking, I'm losing my company car, which in Germany is still, the car is still a very important area, so don't touch it.
Does everyone in Germany get like a BMW or Mercedes or something?
No. But for people who has part of their compensation a company car, if you touch this is really a serious point because it's part of your salary. Yeah, and if you then hear a technology which technically takes the reason for a car off, they get nervous, and then you need to start and say, no. You need to think about all the meetings where you are traveling 3 hours for just half an hour or 1 hour meeting. These could be replaced in the future by VR. I'm not talking about where you go and spend a full day at a customer site and talk to several people and drink the coffee with them and maybe have in the evening a beer with them to get relationships, relationship building ongoing. I'm not talking about this, but I'm talking about the 1 hour meeting where you just drive 3 hours, have 1 hour meeting, and then drive 3 hours back. These type of sessions could be replaced. And I'm not saying should be, could be replaced, because there will be still jobs where it's not possible to do. But also I'm always saying, think about the benefit you can get. You go to your customer and you have glasses with you, and you can always call your global expert at any point of time joining the meeting without asking him to fly in and join you, and maybe he's absolutely not needed.
I love that. I love that you said that. Sorry to cut you off, but that last point you made, I think is so important, because yes, it is creating opportunities to cut costs on travel and like the global emissions coming down and sustainability. There's a lot of talk about that, right? But there's not as much focus on the things you can do in VR are just different than the things you can do in person, right? So being able to go to an in-person meeting and have a VR headset with you. So instead of pulling up a PowerPoint on the screen, you can put a headset on real quick and give a 5 to 10 minute demonstration that removes all distraction. They're not looking at their phone on the desk. They're not looking at their notebook. They're just focused on the demo, and you're able to immerse them in this unique experience. You can tap into a different part of their brain than you can when you're just basically throwing a slide deck in front of them. And to your point, you can also loop in members of your team so effectively and like be able to call anyone into that environment. So I'm actually seeing a big trend with this in in-person events. Event booths are starting to just send a headset with their team.
Yeah, and you mentioned the other important thing is they are fully focused, which people don't understand. Having an email client open on your PC, or getting disturbed by your mobile phone, and it's so natural to quickly look at your watch from whom was the text message. If you wear the glasses, you can still look on your watch, but first, no, you will see it. You have to move your glasses, and everybody will see that you are not with them, and you get directly approached. Are you doing something else? Because it's like you don't do this in a physical environment. You don't say, "Hey, why you look permanently on your mobile phone?" In VR, it's so obvious, and therefore the people don't do it, because it's like, it's in our meeting, it's all okay, And this is also something which I think is a huge value which people underestimate.
All right, so I got a relatively big pivot here, but I've been wanting to ask you about this the whole time. So far, great conversation, Rolf, by the way. I love hearing about your perspective on things. You're such a fun, high-energy person in this space. And it's actually a great pivot into what I want to ask you about. So I know you just got back from South by Southwest. You spent some time in Austin, and I did not get a chance to go this year. I'm hoping I will next year. But I was following your story on LinkedIn of this Find Rolf, and people were confusing you for Charlie Fink. And it was just so fun to see your story as you're walking around. And it looked like you had an absolute blast. So give me the rundown. What are the highlights of South by Southwest?
The highlight was... the fun thing was it was exactly two people I got mixed. One was Charlie Fink, which was really hilarious, that I was so often approached that I simply texted him and said, "Can we meet? I need a picture," that the people see the difference. And the funny was there was another guy, a German guy, which unfortunately I didn't met. He was also on stage, I think Sunday or Monday, where I was also approached, which was quite fun. I must say, the event for me was the first time in Austin. Love the event. It's a totally different atmosphere. For me, the exhibition was it's nice that there's something, but it was not blowing me away at all. The VR experience area, I think, was cool for people who are new to VR, who want to see what is technically possible. For an insider, it's a bit difficult to get the hue factor because it's, yeah, we know what is possible. What I really liked is the easy way to get connected with people and the variety of events set up where you can really you go there. And my highlight was there was a XR development meetup, which the guys were great in preparing it. They put chairs in a cycle, and the first time when I came in, I thought like, oh my god, is this some I have a problem with alcohol, I'm sorry type of meeting? It was really hilarious, and we everybody sit together, and it was a huge group. And Sebastian, who was with me, he was the first, and he said like, hey, my name is Seb, I'm from Germany, Raum, blah 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 blah. And then I started and said like, hey, I'm Rolf from Raum, blah 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 blah. So the third person said, I'm very sorry, I'm Japanese, I'm not from Germany. And at the end of the day, we find out that around about 40% of the people were from Germany or related to German company, where we really were surprised how strong the German/European part was. But the really fun thing was everybody was putting some private information in the discussion. Like one said, oh, I'm from America, the only German I could offer is my ex-wife. And it was really hilarious. And at the end, everybody was like, started networking direct with the person who he wants to meet. And it was absolutely, the atmosphere was brilliant. So I can always recommend, I'm really looking forward for next year. I can recommend people going to South by Southwest for the main purpose of knowing people, getting good networks. I met two of your colleagues, which was also really hilarious because I had the feeling we bumped in so many occasions into it. It was really nice to see that it was not the first time, hey, nice to meet you, and you walk away. It was nice to meet you. You walk away 2 days later, hey, good to see you. 2 days later, hey, you're still here. That's great. So you really see how the XR community is still a large, but still familiar, small type of environment. So really, really loved it. It was a shame that you didn't have the chance, but maybe next year.
Maybe next year. And the thing I love about conferences like that, like the niche conferences are great for being able to like post up a quick booth. It's a little more cost effective and all that great stuff. But these big events like South by Southwest, AWE, CES, like the big ones that beat the drum of innovation, they're exciting because you get to see all the big announcements that companies make. But to your point, when you're there for a couple of days, you really get to just integrate yourself into like-minded people that are all building in the space, buying in the space, trying to learn about the space. Like they're all around it and want to talk about it and want to share. And you're in that kind of welcoming environment where you're around your people. And I think that there's something really special about that's never going to go away, right? Like you and I are on the same page about this. Like as much as we're fully invested in VR, like that in-person component is still very special.
Absolutely. And it's the point is really, it's the atmosphere. Yes, of course, you can do kind of like, I must say, following up, do regular meeting the people in VR. Great. But you would never have this type of like first introduction because it is this South by Southwest is made for great networking. So when you be in a queue, the people turn around and say, hey, where are you from? What are you doing? And it was like an elevator pitch. Everywhere where you were, you gave the elevator pitch. And then instead of walking away, you said, okay, now it's your turn. And you hear a complete different story. And you think like, okay, how long did we now wait here in the queue? Half an hour. And we met people and did elevator pitch to each other. Back and forward.
You get so much feedback. So when I was at CES, not this most recent CES, but the one before, I was fortunate enough to where our company bought a booth. And so I was hosting this booth and just talking to people all day, every single day. And you basically get to give the same pitch to 100 different people within a couple hours. And there's no better way to tighten your pitch and cut out certain words and like really get it perfected than having 100 different people give you different questions and responses, right? And like you learn so much in such a tight period of time. But out South by Southwest specifically, what was the demographic like? So you mentioned the XR meetup. Was it mostly like marketers or educators, technologists, creatives? Like, what was the main kind of persona of people you came across?
Totally mixed. So a lot of entrepreneurs. We had contacts, creatives too. So was really up to potential customers. So really totally wide variety of connection. And this is a really special thing because you talk to people and you think like in the first moment, I have absolutely no clue how, it was nice to meet you and cool stuff. And you do the following up and they were like, couple of days passed and they're like, no, we need to talk because I was thinking about, this is a way we have a synergy. And you think like, oh, yeah, you're right. In the moment, you have no idea. But a couple of days later, you find out great opportunity. And as mentioned, all type of from a potential customer up to really cool startups, up to creative people. My highlight was Burning Man, seeing Burning Man in VR. Interesting piece. So I put it on my bucket list because I thought like, hey, I want to experience this in real. It's nice to have the chance to see it in virtual reality, but I think this must be 10 times cooler. It was already cool, but in real life, it must be 10 times cooler.
That's an interesting point too, right? Is like we can leverage virtual environments to amplify physical spaces. So like digital twins is a great example. Like a company might spend $200 million to build this amazing in-person campus with incredible architecture and like all these amazing little workspaces. But then they might hire employees remotely and some of them might come to that office, some of them might not. And being able to use a virtual environment to give exposure to that physical space can actually get people more excited about that physical space too.
Yeah, exactly. But also like for the whole area of art and creative, if you think about it, museums normally have one big problem. They don't have enough space. A lot of stuff is in the basement and will never be on display. And can you simply imagine you have a virtual immersive environment where you can see all the pieces which are not on display, but also see things which are on display. Maybe, as you mentioned, in the same virtual digital twin building, you can get a snapshot and say like, great, if I'm in New York, I want to go to this museum because I have visited now virtual already.
Have you
and
seen
I liked
an
it.
example of this, by the way, of like a virtual gallery that's done a good job of this?
Not yet, but we at Raum, we have a gallery exactly for this purpose. And we also at South by Southwest, I spoke to a person who is working at a museum in New York. That's the reason why I'm mentioning New York, which I really like, But in these areas, I think the people I think for them, VR is still too far in the future. But there I can see so many benefits of like, yes, for example, you don't have the financial power of traveling to this place and see the museum. You still can get into the museum. And it could be maybe that you still buy a ticket, which a business case could be also for the museum, instead of having an entry fee from, I don't know, $20 or no clue, you buy it for $1.50 and make it available for everybody. And, there's a lot of areas where I think, have not explored.
There's a few ideas that I think of based on that. First of all, I think it's an amazing use case. Like, I think the idea of like allowing more art to be exposed that usually is just locked away, especially the level of art you're talking about, this really expensive, really specialized high-end art. But the idea of being able to sell a ticket for a virtual event, people do this already with webinars and corporate conferences and stuff. And I think it's always been kind of looked down on a little bit of like, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of money to go watch a virtual stream of something. Like, people do it, but it's not looked at as something to invest a lot into. Versus with some of the things happening with VR now, I like my favorite example of it. I don't know if you saw what the Brooklyn Nets did with the Metaverse I think it was about a year and a half ago. They basically made a proof of concept where they used LiDAR to track all of the players' movements in real time and create a digital twin of the players and the court, where you could actually watch the game as if it was a game of 2K. Like you could put a headset on and go into the point of view of any player on the court. Well, that is something that you could probably charge as much as you charge courtside seats for, damn near. Like the experience of being able to go watch the game from literally any angle and like be right there. That's special, and that's something that people might spend a pretty decent amount of money on.
And there was no complaint about one important topic I learned because we during my Sony career we did something similar where a pitch was recorded with 2 4K cameras and was brought into PlayStation, and you were in the virtual launch and you could see the real pitch, the real game running. The biggest concern was nobody was able to grab the drink.
Yeah, that's so.
And this type of like, what you do there, and they still see it is still different. It will never be the point that it replaces something. But if you be in a different continent and you want to join your team, you accept that you cannot grab.
Like there's a trade-off. There's always
but
a trade-off.
You be in. Exactly.
One of the other examples of this I really loved using AR is what Deloitte did with the PGA, where they created this application on your phone where you could essentially hold your phone out and see the course of the golf course as a 3D AR object in your living room. And what's great about that for a sport like golf, or I could see this working really well for something like baseball, is the sport's a lot more stagnant, where you don't have to replicate a lot of human body movements to get the experience across. It's more about tracking the ball from one place to another and the wind and these other factors that they already animate into TV broadcasts anyways. So all the technology's there, they have it down. And then being able to bring that into your living room is something that provides that immersive kind of special experience. But there's a second thing I want to talk to you about. When you mentioned the art example, I immediately jumped to thinking about NFTs. Because I've talked to some of these guys that run mega galleries, that NFTs are very top of mind for them, for creating loyalty programs, and digital twins of art is something that they do already for tracking authenticity, and like the computer can see things the human eye can't see for like the level of kind of like the condition of the art. And there was an interesting project that StockX tried and ended up, I believe, shutting down, called The Vault, where basically you could buy a pair of sneakers or a collectible or something from their site as an NFT. That would be stored, the physical product would be stored in a vault by StockX. And then you could basically own the NFT and resell it and do anything you want with it without having to store the shoes and keep them in good condition, without having to ship them anywhere and pay for shipping. Like all of these risks, carbon emissions, and costs get removed. And then if anyone who owns the NFT wants the sneakers, they just burn the NFT. StockX then sends it out the vault and gives you the actual sneakers. And I think in the art world, that concept makes so much sense to me, of like an art collector having a bunch of NFTs and then all of the art is just stored in the gallery's warehouse somewhere. And I'm curious how deep down that rabbit hole you've gone into blockchain, and if you think blockchain has a place in this metaverse world, if it's a requirement at some point, or if you think it's something that you're pretty hesitant about. Like, where are you on the movement for NFTs and blockchain?
It's a technology, yes. And we will see in the future where it will be used, in which area it will be used. So right now I cannot say, I must say, right now I cannot say, 100% NFT is the shit it's mandatory to have, and blockchain is mandatory. I think it will be shown over time. There are a technology, both are technologies which comes with something nice, as you describe. You have clear the ownership, and you can do a lot of. There could be done a lot of potential new business cases utilizing these technology. The biggest thing is, will it be something that it becomes so natural for everybody that the people using it, like they use a mobile phone and contactless payment? My biggest example, I traveled very frequently 2008-ish regular to China. It was normal to pay with a phone there. And you get a text message that confirms your payment, simply to make sure your credit card is, got the right amount and all the stuff. Where the rest of the world was still like credit card, and if your credit card was already luxury, you pay cash. And if I look at today, again, in Germany by law, you do not need to accept credit cards or debit cards. Cash is the only by law recommended payment methods. So if you go to a restaurant and you want to pay by card, they can reject it because they simply say no. And we're not talking about something like contactless payment, which over the past 2 years also comes a big push because of please pay contactless because you don't spread around the virus, etc. And I think with NFTs and blockchain, if the technology is not longer visible for the people, they will simply use it, and they will see the benefit as you describe. I can keep, and I'm not sure if people who collect arts are a big favor, or if the type of art the collector in the more electronic way will go, but the physical collectors will still like to have it in their wall or in their walls. You never know it. But I think the technology, if the technology moves in the background, this is where the people is accepting it, and then nobody will talk about NFT, blockchain. They simply will take their wallet out, whatever it is, and they will do the purchase, or they will simply say, hey, cool, I buy this digital asset, and I'm happy with it. So maybe it becomes normal that when you buy physical glasses, you get automatically an NFT related that you can use it on your avatar. So you never know. But I think this is something in the future. Right now, it's big trends. The same like AI currently is big in news. Let's simply wait 6 months. Maybe another technology is popping up. Again, for me, AI will be also a part of the metaverse in some aspects.
Yeah, I think with AI it's easier because the value is more visible inherently. And I think the issue that I find with blockchain, because I still believe in a lot of pieces of it, right? Like I think the concept of digital ownership and valuing digital assets makes a lot of sense to me. The idea of decentralized finance, I think there's a lot of truth in that, especially with seeing what's going on with the banking system in America right now, with the fall of SVB and kind of what's happening there, like kind of shines a light on why Bitcoin maxis exist and why they are pushing for that decentralization. But the big issue that I have in the time I've spent in Discord channels and all these forums talking about blockchain is that a lot of these guys are more excited about the technology than the use case. And the problem with that is you end up solving for problems that don't exist. So there are real problems that this technology can solve for, and that's why you're seeing so many big companies invest in it. As much as Jamie Dimon is very anti-crypto, JP Morgan has an entire division called Onyx, which is a major player in the crypto space, right? But I think that shift with it, that exactly what you said, it's like, how do we stop focusing on NFT blockchain and start focusing on what does that technology do? How does it benefit?
Yeah, exactly. And I think ignoring it is exactly the same wrong thing, like believing it's the holy grail. If you make a comparison, in the past, a mobile phone was used for calling people.
Yeah, now it's a vending machine.
and now people get used to send text message, and they forgot to call. The pure purpose in the past was to call people. And it has so much stuff, but it's so normal. The generation, the kids of today, for them it's so normal to use it for text message, to browse, to learn something. It's in the palm of your hand, In the past, we had to get thick books to find out the stuff. You go on Discord servers and learn about blockchain. In the past, we had to take books for this. You go in a library and buy some stuff. So things will change. And I think it's always good to monitor. It's always good to see, but it needs to be in a way, as I mentioned, that the mass, the people will see a functionality or a process and not the technology. in the moment, it's like right now, NFT and blockchain, it's a technology aspect. But most of the people say, I have no clue for what it is. If you use it like a credit card, they will use it. And if you say, by the way, this special card is using blockchain, and this is why it's so protective and blah, 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 people will say, oh, really cool. I was not aware of this.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think most of the people like that would listen to this podcast are probably a little further along than most people. But it is easy to forget how little the rest of the world knows about some of this stuff. Like with blockchain, there's still a lot of people that are like, what is a blockchain? Like they don't have context. And then with VR, a lot of people are like, how do I move once I'm in the space? Like you have to meet people where they are on the journey to get somewhere. And I'm realizing sorry, go for it.
Yeah, you mentioned that your grandparents have Tesla and stuff. Have you ever put them in a VR glasses to show them?
Not yet. We've been
VR
talking
piece?
about it actually.
You have to do it because before they only see the word, but they don't believe it. And I was really, I did this with my mother, and she was really that interested. That was the first time she said, "No, I understand what you're doing." And as you said, we are too close in our bubble, so let's see what the future will bring.
This is where I think WebXR is a great stepping stone. Like I don't think you can do the same things. I think it's actually a very different product than a VR experience. But it is a great stepping stone to introduce people that did not grow up with online gaming to what it's like to see a virtual world, like the level of graphics we've been able to accomplish, the fact that this isn't the same as playing, Mario on the Super Nintendo back in the day. like it's all different now. But I am realizing we've broken the hour point, and I've got some other meetings I've got to get to this afternoon. But before we hop off, I always like to give a chance for you to give a plug. If you wanted to announce anything you're working on or a place people can find you, like what would you like people to learn about?
So the key thing is feel free to connect me on LinkedIn. Always happy to meet other people, to simply, the world is so small, technology is great, and looking forward to meet maybe one or another of your audience in our lovely environment Raum. Do I want to make a sneak peek? No, simply come in, experience by yourself. It's the only thing I can recommend. Try it out. And if you want to get in contact, feel free to connect with me. LinkedIn is a preferred channel. Always happy to meet cool people.
Perfect. We'll throw those details in the description too, so people have some easy links to go learn about Raum and follow Rolf on his story. Again, thanks so much for the conversation. I'm excited to run this back eventually with you. And you're one of the most knowledgeable and high energy people in the space. So the industry needs you, and I'm happy we had a chance to record today.
I'm really happy that it worked out this time with a much better internet connection as last time, where I was a bit disappointed that we had to postpone it. But happy, Ricky, to get
one of these days. I'll run into Charlie Fink. I'll be like, "Hey, Rolf, how you doing?"
Yeah, maybe next year people will approach him and say, "Hey, Rolf," and he said, no, unfortunately not. So this is my target for maybe next or in 2 years.
Amazing. All right. We'll call it.